All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. If you've made it to this point, congratulations. I've been doing a series of videos for the AWD 1000 Web Technologies class for the fall 2017 semester. And I'm up to over 100 videos. I started by going through, made about 17 videos of all the Terry Felk Morris text, all of her PowerPoints. From there I went on and did one of the case studies. And the one I just happened to grab was the Fish Creek Animal Hospital case study. So I went through those. There's not one for every chapter, but there's probably about 1 in 10 out of the 14 chapters or so. Okay, then, and I maybe should have done this first, but I gave an HTML5 intro over 3 different lessons. And then I went through some HTML5 fundamentals. And as I look at that, I'm a little bit weird about this, but I've been going over some HTML and HTML5 fundamentals, what you see on the screen right now. All right, from there we went on and went over some CSS and CSS3 fundamentals. Okay, then we went into our other textbook, which I call it VG for Vodnik-Gosselin, because Sasha Vodnik and Don Gosselin are the authors of our textbook, JavaScript 6th edition. So I went over the 12 chapters worth of PowerPoints in there. Then I went through a bunch of examples using a miles per gallon program where I went over some JavaScript examples, not every chapter in the book, but the major ones we're going to cover. All right. After that, we went through, and I'm looking, and I think I missed one here, but after that, we went through and we started talking about JavaScript strings and JavaScript arrays, because the program that we did in the class was not real conducive miles per gallon to strings and arrays. All right. Then we went through some jQuery fundamentals, and I went through about 8 or 9 lectures on that. From there, we jumped into Bootstrap, and I went out to the getbootstrap.com, but the version 4, which is still in alpha mode, I went over there and did a few presentations. Then I went through the Quacket Bootstrap tutorial and went through about 8 presentations there. And finally I went through, at the end of the tutorial, there were a bunch of programmatic examples, and I went through those. Well, now, as they say, it's time, for lack of better words, it's kind of time for the rubber to meet the road. And what I mean by that is now it's time to build a site. And when I came in to build a site, I had my choice over how I wanted to do this. What does that mean? Well, I could start from scratch and basically build everything myself, or I could use a template, okay, or I could grab a site maybe I'd done before and use that. I didn't really want to go and grab something I'd done before, because to me that didn't seem fair to you. So I went out, and first I went out to html5up.net, and I found a bunch of these. Just a bunch of free templates. So for instance, if I grab this one that says, I don't know, solid state, and I can click live demo, and I can get this stuff already created for me. But again, it seemed kind of, not that it was cheating, but it didn't seem like the right way to do this. So, plus most of these are very bootstrap-ish looking. So I went out to yet another site called, let me show you what I've been doing here. So I first went out to html5up.net and looked at their HTML5 and CSS3 tutorials. All right. Then I went out to another site that's called css3templates.co.uk, because it's an English site, /templates.html. It was a little closer to what I was looking at, and I actually found this one that was out here, just to show it to you, that I thought of using, and that was, I think it was the CSS3 Skies, okay? And looked like this. It wasn't bad, so I'd have some kind of a banner thing over here, another picture here that you could leave or keep, some text, a footer, and a side over here. And I thought, that's not really exactly what I want either. So I did decide, for good, bad, or indifferent, to just start at the beginning. Okay? So I went out to and found a product that's called HTML Boilerplate, which I've used before. So the first thing I'd like to show you very quickly, and I'm not going to bring it up, this doesn't work well when I actually show a video. All right, when I actually show a video, when I'm making a video. That said, and I'll show you the URL in just a minute, there's a 7-minute long video out here by a thing that's called Tuts Plus. They do all sorts of tutorials on all things IT. And this is on HTML5 boilerplate. Okay? So I'm going to talk about what's in that tutorial in just a minute. But again, if you are interested, you can just go out to HTML5 boilerplate.com. When you do, this is what you see. The web's most popular front-end template. HTML5 boilerplate helps you build fast, robust, and adaptable web apps or sites. Kickstart your projects with a combined knowledge and effort of hundreds of developers, all in one little package. And they talk about what's in here. It comes complete if you choose to download them with analytics, and if you don't know what analytics are, they're a way that you can have, Google Analytics is probably the best known. Keep track of how many people are coming out to your website, the pages they're looking at most often, etc. So why would you want to know that? Well, if I've got a brand new website and I've got 500 hits on it within a couple days, there's a big difference between, let's say, 5 people each going out there 100 times and 500 people each going out there once. All right? It's got normalize.css, which is kind of like a CSS reset file. We'll talk about that in a minute. In fact, let me bring that file. I'll bring it up in a new tab. It comes with jQuery, and it's a CDN version, a content delivery version, a content delivery network version of jQuery. And it's got something called Modernizer, which again, we can talk about in just a minute. And finally, as it says, it's got Apache settings to help you deliver site performance. Well, here's another video, and I didn't even see this one.
Some of the changes we made in HTML5 boilerplate version 5.0. We made a number of changes, including the addition of an improved config file, big improvements to the documentation, and updates for touch icons and Windows tile images. The HTML5 boilerplate's project goal is to provide a great baseline foundation for your web projects.
There it is, right there. HTML5 boilerplate's goal is to provide you with a template that you can use. Okay, good. That's exactly what we're looking for. All right? So, when we look at this and we come back up to the top, well, notice I can either download it or I can get a custom build. Let's look at both. I'm going to do the download, but first, let's look at the custom build. There's 3 different ways that I can set this up. Okay? I can do a classic HTML5 boilerplate, so I can click there, and then I've got my choice over what I want. I can have no template. I can have a Twitter Bootstrap template. I can have a mobile-first responsive template. So let's say I chose that one. Okay? I can have what are called polyfills, and what polyfills do is they try to set things up for you so that if people are using old browsers that are pre-IE9, especially Internet Explorer 7 and 8, can handle it okay. That's what Modernizer will do. It goes along with HTML Shiv, all right? And I'm not sure even what Respond is. Then jQuery. Do I want the minified version? You've seen that before, where all the white space basically has been removed. Or do I want the actual development version? Then do I want any of this stuff? Do I want Google Analytics? Do I want an HT access page? Do I want a favicon, etc.? Do I want all this stuff? Do I want a humans.txt file? So I can choose to have as many of these or not have as many of these as I want. All right? There's also a responsive in here. And now basically what that does is it changes and it adds the respond other than that, and I guess it gives me IE classes. It removes the HT access and the robots.txt and some of these files. Finally, I can make it a bootstrap. So the first way is going to make it responsive or non-responsive. The second way is responsive without bootstrap. The third way is to make it bootstrap responsive. All right? So I've got my choice over which of these I want, or I can just go back and say, you know what, just download the whole bleeping thing. So I'm going to grab that. Download version 5.3.0. And it downloads it into my downloads folder. And I think I've got it on here already, but I'm going to put a new folder in here. And I'm going to call it HTML5 BP for boilerplate. All right. Then I'm going to paste that file in there, that zip folder, and then I'm going to extract it right in here. Just so we can see everything we get. All right. All right, a lot of files. Well, if we look at the HTML files, so we do it by type here, we've got two. We've got a 404 file, which is our own page not found, and we've got an index file, which really doesn't have much in it, but we'll look at that in a minute. We've also got CSS, which has got a normalized file in it. That normalized file, basically what it does is it does the equivalent of pretty much doing like a CSS reset for us. And I'm going to show you what it does in just a second, okay? So that's, and then after that, let me close these. I don't want to confuse you here. So we've got that normalized file, and we've got a main file, which I think is empty, okay? We can put our own stuff in here. I guess there are a few things in here. All right. Okay. Then, I already mentioned we've got our index file. Let's look at that. Again, a few things in there. We've got these things right here, these pings, and they're basically set up so that we're able to have different kinds of icons if we're using an iPhone or an iPad. So I'm not even going to go over those. All right. We've got some XML stuff. These are just the stuff that we chose before by basically choosing everything we did choose. We've got a robots.txt file, which tells the system when we're going through there, any file that we list in here, in this robottext.org, all right, or anything that we've got, basically, we want to put in this file, don't spider it. In other words, don't look through it. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. We've got a JavaScript file, and that's got a vendor file with jQuery in it and with Modernizer in it. You notice, again, they're both minified. So there's jQuery minified. And again, as you've already seen, many lines long, but it's the minified version. Then we've got Modernizer, also a minified version. And again, that is, as I mentioned to you earlier, that is meant to handle older browsers, in particular IE 6, 7, and 8. All right, we've got a main.js, nothing in it. That's where we put our own JavaScript. We've got a plugin.js that's got a bunch of, a little bit of the plugin stuff. All right, and I'm not going to worry about that right now. We've got a doc file that you might want to look at. They've got some documentation in it. An image folder with really no images in it yet. All right. And that's pretty much it. So let's quickly take a look at as far as what's in here. This is the HTML file, and it's not very big. All right. We've got our doc type tag. We've got our... In fact, let's take a couple minutes and talk about what's in this file. All right. So this is, again, a basic template that has been created for us. And I know much of this information we've already talked about. So first we've got the document type declaration, or DTD, or doc type declaration. This is how we let the browser know the type of document we're looking at. In other words, which version of HTML are we looking at? The one that's in gray here that you see in line 1 is the HTML5 version. There's no 5 in it, but that's what it is. You may have remembered, if you've ever done any work previously, that you might have had a doc type HTML public where you used a strict, which meant you can't use any of the tags that have been deprecated, a transitional, which means you can use them, but you can't use the frame set tags, and a frame set, where you can use all of the older tags that have been deprecated, including the frame set tags. All right? Then we've got our HTML tag. Okay? We've included the lang attribute with a value of en for English, but we don't have to. Okay? This says class Node.js, so we can add information into a class, into a CSS class called Node.js that will handle it if our user has JavaScript disabled. All right? Next, we've got the head section, and that's everything you see here in gray. The first line that we have defines the character set that we're going to use. Again, we're using a UTF, which I believe is Universal Transformation Format 8-bit code, which means that we're using Unicode. All right? After that, we've got this next meta tag, and this, I believe, is a fix for the Edge browser. So it's another fix. I think that what this says is this: if you've got an IE browser that's before Edge, treat it as though it was Edge. You'll notice that right now we don't have a title, so we get a blank title. So if I put in here website title, saved it, and ran this page, all right, now it says website title. Whereas previously, if we had left it off and run the page, it just says index.html, which is the name of the file. Again, always recommended that you put a title in there, used by search engines, etc. All right. Next, we've got a couple meta lines. Okay? This, where it says name equal description, and there's no content in there. What we can put in there is we can put a description of the site in there. Some taglines is what they're referred to as. It's not shown in there, but if we wanted to, we could also have not just a description tag, but we could copy this, and if I really wanted to, and this has nothing to do with vanity, I could come in here and say, put another thing in here that says name author, and then content equal, and I could put, for example, Jeff Scott here, if I wanted to do that. These meta tags, again, are used by search engines. The next line, name equal viewport, this means that I'm trying to build this as much as possible with a mobile first type of mentality. So I'm saying, look at the width of the device I'm using and attempt to use all of it. All right, whether it's a phone, a laptop, a tablet, a desktop, or whatever. And this says set my initial scaling at 100%. Hopefully all of that made sense. This, as it says right here, works with Apple Touch. So if I'm using Apple Touch, I can put my own icon in there. I can put my own favicon in there. Remember, the favicon is what comes up over here. All right. Then the next line that we put in here, this adds our CSS normalize.css. I showed you that previously. That's this file. All right. Oops. And then next, we add our own file with our own CSS in it. So this is the file that if I wanted to, and I came up to the top, I could put, and I like to do this a lot of times at the start, I could put in here body background. Remember, I can put in either background dash color or just background, but I'm going to say green here. Why? I'm going to show you in a second. Now, when I go in here and I run, you saw what this just looked like. If I refresh, it's grabbing that green from my CSS file. All right. Next, I can bring in the modernizer. And again, what modernizer does is it goes and it takes a look at earlier browsers that may not support HTML5 tags, and it says, hey, if you're confused, for example, if you're confused with some of the new HTML5 tags, whereas instead of saying input equal text, you say input equal email or input equal number, etc. If you're confused by that, just treat them as though it said input equal text. Okay? Here's another one. This is for IE, but versions less than IE8, and it's doing pretty much the same thing. All right? Then we have this, which is our only line that comes up on the screen, which says, hello world, this is HTML5 boilerplate, and you already saw that one. That's this line right here. All right? Then we add jQuery. And again, we're using the CDN version, the Content Delivery Network, which is saying go out to code.jquery.com and find that version. Not the newest version, but it's the one they're using. This next one is kind of interesting. In English, what this says is, hey, if I've already got jQuery, if I already have it, all right, if I have jQuery already loaded up here, use it. If I don't, but I have it loaded locally, use that. Which is kind of neat because in English what it's saying is if I'm hooked up to the internet, grab jQuery from the internet or see if it's already been cached onto my system. If I don't have an internet connection right now, maybe I'm out someplace and I'm not at a Wi-Fi or hotspot or whatever, or I'm just at home and I've got, for whatever reason, the internet is down, then use my own local copy. Then add my plugins file and add my own JavaScript. Remember, jQuery first, then plugins, which may depend on jQuery, probably will, then my main, which again probably will depend on jQuery. Finally, these are the analytics. You'd have to be a lot smarter than me to know what this does. But basically it does add Google Analytics to your site. All right? So I started with that. And it's time, because I'm going to start this in the next lecture, to show you where I went from there. So I've shown you here that I could have gone the HTML5 up.NET route, and I didn't. I could have gone the CSS3 templates, but I didn't. I showed you where you could find that YouTube video, and that is what I used, was the HTML boilerplate from html5boilerplate.com. In the next lecture, what I'm going to do in the next lecture is I'm going to come in and talk a little bit about the semantic elements, a little bit about some Chrome extensions, and then we're actually going to go in and take a look at what it is we're going to build. All right? So I'll be back with that shortly.